The Cleveland Browns thought they had a plan, a conventional quarterback grooming technique, a third-round pick they believed in, a development timeline they could control. But then, Shedeur Sanders showed up, not simply to participate, but to take over. And now, that plan, it's disintegrating by the day. Inside the Browns training camp, a storm is building. And it's not just about skill, it's politics, it's ego, it's reputation. And it's all playing out on the practice field in front of astonished veterans, shattered coaches, and a front management fighting to keep control. One quarterback is silently coming apart. The other is playing like the franchise depends on him, because it well could. What started as a summer evaluation has grown into one of the most startling and divisive quarterback wars the NFL has seen in years. And it's not just a war anymore. It's a takeover. At first, it was only whispers, a few raised eyebrows, quiet chatter in the changing room, coaches exchanging glances during workouts. But by day 3 of training camp, those rumors evolved into one clear reality. Shedeur Sanders wasn't just competing, he was dominating. Reports leaked from within Berea, 78% completion rate, not in walkthroughs, but against the Browns' first-team defense. Deep shots, red zone conversions, command of the pocket. Meanwhile, Dillon Gabriel, the anticipated starter, was barely clearing 65%, and that was against the backups. The contrast wasn't subtle. Sanders was shooting tight spirals into impossible windows. Gabriel, playing it safe, checkdowns, hesitation, field goals where there should have been touchdowns. Internally, evaluators couldn't ignore it. The performance difference was expanding every day. But there was one concern on everyone's mind. If Sanders is torching the first-team defense in practice, why isn't he running with the first-team offense? That question would become the fuse. And what occurred next blasted it all wide open. The stats didn't lie. The eye test didn't either. But inside the Browns facilities, something was wrong. Despite Sanders lighting up every session, the coaching staff kept him trapped behind Gabriel on the depth chart. Publicly, they hailed Gabriel's system knowledge and consistency. But behind closed doors, the coaching room was cracking. Sources confirmed it. The QB coach was discreetly lobbying for Sanders. The offensive coordinator, still cycling for Gabriel. Head coach Kevin Stefanski, cornered. Do you honor the plan or confront the truth on the field? Then came the shock no one anticipated coming. Kenny Pickett went down, a grade 2 hamstring strain, 4 to 6 weeks. One less name in the competition, one domino down. Fans instantly turned up the pressure. With Pickett out, why not give Sanders a real shot? But even with Gabriel underperforming and Sanders turning heads, the team held the line. Behind the scenes, management raised worries. He's too raw, doesn't know the complete playbook, has to develop the right way. Meanwhile, the players weren't buying it. They recognized what was occurring, and their loyalty was moving fast. And that's when everything truly started to flip. It was meant to be a standard 2-minute drill. But what Sanders did in those next 120 seconds, it changed everything. Sources claim it was surgical. Precise reads, excellent footwork, tight window lasers, handling safeties like a pro. He took apart the Browns' starting defense like he'd been in the league for 10 years. Receivers couldn't stop smiling. The sideline erupted. Even the defenders, some of the league's best, were shaking their heads. And the coaches? Stone-faced. No reaction, no compliments, just silent clipboards and tense jaws. Then it was Gabriel's time. Trying to repeat the magic, he overthrew a checkdown, missed a dig route, and completed the drive with a disheartening interception that left the air flat on the field. Observers saw the contrast. One quarterback radiated poise, timing, and utter control. The other, rattled. This wasn't just a competition anymore. It was a transition in real time, a shift from developmental rookie to unmistakable leader. And the players felt it first. The Browns' locker room is no stranger to loudness. But this was different. Veteran players were taking sides. Only this time, it wasn't subtle. And it wasn't split. Offensive weapons, receivers, tight ends, even the offensive line, started gravitating toward Sanders. During film sessions, practice reps, and sideline huddles, they leaned in when he spoke. One unidentified wideout didn't hold back. This kid's making throws nobody thought were possible, and everyone sees it. Defenders too. Privately, even defensive backs said they couldn't read his ball placement. Linebackers say he was diagnosing their schemes like a 10-year vet. One even remarked, He's reading us like a book, and he's the one writing it. And while the coaching staff sought to stick to their development script, the players were already making their decision, not with public quotes, but with body language, effort, and focus. Every time Sanders stepped under center, the intensity rose. Receivers polished their routes. Linemen communicated louder. Even the backups stood taller. The message was clear: real recognize real. But as Sanders was drawing the room together, Gabriel was coming apart. While Sanders was surging, Dillon Gabriel was unraveling. Not publicly, not in interviews or pressers, but in the small moments. And they are the ones that matter. Sources described his body language as tight, frustrated, and disconnected. Missed throws weren't followed by corrections, just quiet, indifferent conversations. Practice reps felt cold. Communication? Minimal. The collaborative energy that once typified the quarterback room, gone. After transferring from Oklahoma, Gabriel assumed he was jumping into a scripted ascension: draft pedigree, system fit, and front office backing. Instead, he found himself being eclipsed, fast, and by someone who was never meant to be a threat. Quarterback meetings grew contentious. Vets started maintaining their distance. What used to be mutual support became quiet separation. One insider expressed it best: Gabriel didn't lose the job in a single play, but the weight of the moment broke his rhythm, and the room could sense it. And then came the moment that poured gasoline on the fire. After practice, Sanders finally addressed the matter and said exactly what he wasn't meant to say. They asked him about reps, about the mounting quarterback tension, about how he was handling the strain, and Sanders didn't dodge. He didn't sugarcoat. He called it out. In front of the cameras, he dropped the line that detonated around the league. Some people should focus on their fundamentals instead of my reps. The room froze, and within hours, the NFL world exploded. ESPN dispatched more reporters to camp. NFL Network wanted access. Debate shows altered their rundowns. Former players jumped in. Twitter, or whatever it's called now, was overwhelmed. And suddenly, this wasn't a Browns camp battle anymore. It was a national football spectacular. Inside the facility, the reaction was quick. The front office was furious. Stefanski reportedly drew Sanders aside for a secret meeting: media discipline, messaging uniformity, and internal protocols. But here's the twist: Sanders didn't back down. Not really. Sources say he was respectful, but unrelenting. He recognized the tone could have been cleaner, but stood by the reality behind it. That's hardly rookie conduct. That's a quarterback facing down the heat and not blinking. And while the media scrutinized every word, Sanders went right back to work. While the headlines flared and the front office scrambled, Sanders kept locked in. No drama, no distractions, just quiet domination. He was the first to come, latest to depart, working through video, running extra reps with receivers, and internalizing the whole playbook. Not simply learning the system, mastering it. One defensive captain put it plainly: the kid's all business, doesn't complain, just delivers. Even coaches who had misgivings began to move. They weren't just witnessing skill, they were seeing discipline, leadership, and the kind of maturity that compels tough decisions. Privately, the Browns began modifying how they arranged sessions: equal reps, tighter tracking, advanced measures that looked beyond raw stats. Even the Veteran Leadership Council was brought in to discuss the locker room's temperature. Because at this point, the situation was no longer just about two quarterbacks. It was about the legitimacy of the company and what message they'd send by how they handled it. And as Sanders kept climbing, the foundation of that narrative was starting to break. At face value, this seemed like a quarterback disagreement. But behind the scenes, it had become something considerably bigger: an organizational reckoning. First, the scouting department came under the examination. Gabriel was picked substantially higher than Sanders. The draft board had been unambiguous. Gabriel was the guy, Sanders was a long-term project. But now that project was ripping the defense, and the third rounder looked like a placeholder. Internally, management were asking the hard questions. If our fifth rounder is this good, what does that say about our process? Beetle. Then came the scheme difficulty. Stefanski's offensive blueprint, built around Gabriel, short reads, timing routes, safe progressions, and yet Sanders was thriving in spite of the system, not because of it. That raised an even deeper concern. Were the coaches flexible enough to adapt, or just pushing the wrong system on the right talent? And lastly, the locker room energy. It wasn't simply high when Sanders played, it was different. Receivers were altering routes mid-session. Linemen were communicating louder. The huddle felt more alive. An assistant coach reportedly said, "The vets are showing their hand, they know who they believe in." The Browns weren't only facing a QB choice, they were looking down the potential that their entire blueprint was outmoded. And Sanders was the proof. By now, it wasn't simply a war for QB1. It was a battle for the soul of the franchise. On one side, Dillon Gabriel. Draft capital, system fluency, a scheme that had been months, maybe years, in the development. Gabriel was the polished prospect, the guy who fit the mold. He epitomized everything Cleveland's front management believed a quarterback should be: safe, structured, prepared. On the opposing side, Shedeur Sanders, raw, electric, unscripted. A fifth-round pick requiring a fifth-gear acceleration. Sanders didn't wait for his moment. He took it. And now the Browns couldn't ignore what they were witnessing. And that's where the identity issue exploded. Stick to the plan, you risk losing the locker room. Vets siding with Sanders, discreetly challenging leadership. Pivot to Sanders, you risk hurting your own credibility, openly ditching your drafted starter and everything you constructed behind him. One insider within the building characterized the dilemma as this: "It's not just a depth chart decision. It's a declaration of what kind of organization we are. Do you reward pedigree or production? Stick to structure or adjust to reality? Protect the plan or promote the truth?" Because at this point, deciding between Gabriel and Sanders wasn't just about week one. It was about who the Browns were going to be. This was the moment fans and analysts had been waiting for. Open media access, full team reps, the eye test, live. Shedeur Sanders had been the talk of camp. But now the cameras were rolling. And in football, perception becomes reality real fast. On paper, his figures were forgettable. 3 for 8, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Gabriel, meanwhile, 6 for 7 with the day's only touchdown. A crisp, deep strike that turned heads. But here's the thing. Stats didn't tell the full story. Sanders' incompletions weren't mental blunders. They were timing plays, contested windows, purposeful deep shots. He wasn't playing it safe. He was testing NFL-level reads, pushing limits. And then came the throw, a sideline dart, tight coverage, no margin for error. And Sanders inserted it like a surgeon. Receiver didn't flinch, defender had no shot. The ball hit like it had magnets in it. One veteran scout monitoring the session said, "That's not a rookie throw, that's a Sunday throw." Meanwhile, Gabriel's day, however efficient, felt scripted. Clean reads, predictable progressions, safe selections. Sanders' performance wasn't about volume. It was about flashing. He didn't have to win every throw. He only had to show he could make the ones most QBs can't. And that laser along the sideline, it might have been the one moment that genuinely mattered. The Browns weren't going to admit it publicly, but inside, the transition had already started. Leadership knew they could no longer afford to hide behind depth charts and pre-draft preparations. They had a hurricane on their hands, and quiet wouldn't hold it back. First, they began reorganizing practice schedules. Reps were now allocated more evenly. Every snap was tracked with new measures. Not only completions, but pressure response, timing, ball placement, and leadership presence. Veteran players were gently pushed aside. Their input was being considered. For the first time, the Veteran Leadership Council was contacted on a quarterback competition. The coaching staff modified film sessions, meetings, even the way drills were prepared, all to present fairness and retake control of the narrative. But the truth? These weren't adjustments. They were containment strategies. Because the longer Sanders continued to perform, the harder it got to deny what was unfolding. And the closer the Browns got to a decision, the more they realized they weren't just evaluating two quarterbacks. They were confronting a moment of no return. Everything feels silent now, too quiet. The headlines have cooled. The reps are cycling evenly. The coaching staff is saying all the right things. Healthy competition. Iron sharpens iron. We love what both guys bring. But make no mistake, this isn't over, it's waiting. Because deep inside that Browns complex, decision day is coming. And when it arrives, there will be ramifications. No matter who they choose, the ripple effects will transform everything. If they go with Gabriel, they risk alienating the very locker room that's been leaning into Sanders. If they crown Sanders, they'll unleash a firestorm of concerns about scouting, planning, and the coaching staff's trustworthiness. Shedeur Sanders is just waiting.